I found them huddled under a highway bridge in the pouring rain. The man was clutching a feverish baby to his chest. Both were soaked to the bone. This wasn't just any homeless man. This was my grandson. For 30 years, I had believed my son's betrayal was the worst pain I would ever feel. The emptied accounts, my husband's heart attack when he discovered the theft, the decades of isolation. I never imagined I would stand in the mud under that concrete overpass, rain soaking through my expensive coat, staring at my husband's eyes in a stranger's face. "James Sterling," I asked, my voice barely audible over the storm. He looked up, suspicious and protective. "Who are you?" he demanded, shielding his baby daughter from this strange woman appearing out of nowhere. "My name is Alice Sterling," I said, crouching down to his level. "I know your father told you I was gone, but I am your grandmother." The look on his face in that moment told me everything was about to change. Before we continue, please leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, and subscribe to the Still Got It True Stories channel. We're creating a community of amazing people who know that our best chapters can happen at any age. Now, back to the story. I had kept the plastic folder on my desk for 3 days. It was black, unremarkable, and thin enough to slide between the pages of a book and disappear. My assistant had placed it there without comment, knowing better than to mention what it contained. For 3 mornings, I had my coffee at this desk, pushed papers around it, and made calls, all while pretending it wasn't there. Today, I was tired of pretending. The Atlantic Ocean stretched beyond my windows, a brilliant blue canvas beneath the Florida sun. I had designed this penthouse myself after Spencer died. All white marble, glass, and steel clean lines. Nothing unnecessary. Nothing to catch dust or memories. I had lived here for 28 years now, and sometimes I still felt like a visitor. I lifted the folder. It was lighter than it should have been, considering what it contained. $30,000 for a 6-page report and 1 photograph. I suppose information does not weigh much these days. Inside was exactly what I had expected. The final report from Decker Investigations. Decker himself was retired now. His son had handled this one. He was less thorough than his father, but discreet. The Sterling name still opened doors, even in the company ran itself now, more or less. I only intervened when the board got sentimental about the old properties. Sentiment is the enemy of sound business. The first page was a summary. Name: James Spencer Sterling. Age 28. Occupation: factory worker, terminated. Current residence: without stable housing. Location: Cleveland, Ohio. Below that was the line my eyes could not seem to move past. Parents: Gregory and Brenda Sterling. Estranged. My coffee had gone cold. I pushed it aside. I knew he existed. Of course, I had hired the first investigator when Gregory disappeared with our money. By then, Brenda was already expecting. I wanted to know where they had gone and what they had done with Spencer's retirement fund, the emergency accounts, and the bonds meant for our grandchildren's education. I found them living comfortably in Seattle. Gregory was working at an investment firm, using Spencer's connections and our name. I shut the investigation down after Spencer's funeral. There seemed little point after that, but 3 weeks ago, something woke me at 2 in the morning, the kind of waking where you are suddenly completely alert. Spencer used to say it was someone walking over your grave. I got up, made tea, and sat in my kitchen, feeling like I was waiting for something. By morning, I had called Decker's son and given him Gregory's name. I did not know what I expected to find after all these years. I did not expect this. The report was methodical, a chronicle of systematic collapse. James Sterling, born in Seattle, moved to Ohio at age 6, an average student with no criminal record, married at 22 to Olivia Whitman, a daughter born 16 months ago, Sophie Marie Sterling, employed at Midwest Manufacturing for 5 years, recently laid off due to plant downsizing. And then, the unraveling. Wife leaves with another man. James loses his apartment due to missed payments. Car repossessed. Applies for shelter space, but is waitlisted due to overcrowding. Makes a phone call to parents requesting temporary housing assistance. Request denied. I read this last line twice. Request denied. So cold. Those 2 words. So familiar. Gregory denying his own son shelter, just as he had denied us any explanation when he cleaned out our accounts and vanished. Some patterns never break. The final page of the report was the photograph. It was grainy, taken from a distance. A man sat hunched under the concrete ceiling of a highway overpass. He had dark hair and a thin frame. He was cradling something to his chest, a bundle wrapped in what looked like a faded blue jacket. A small hand was visible, reaching up toward his face. I set the picture down carefully, as if it might crumble between my fingers. I was back in our old house on Heavenwood Drive. 30 years vanished like smoke. The house was too quiet when I opened the door. Spencer's car was in the garage, but he did not answer when I called. I found him in his study, staring at the open safe in the wall. It was empty. The antique desk where he had kept his grandfather's pocket watch had its drawers hanging open. I remember how he did not turn when I entered. He just kept staring at the empty safe. "Gregory took it all," he said. It was not a question. His voice was flat, like he was commenting on the weather. I called the bank, called our accountant, called Gregory's phone over and over. No answer. By the time I looked back at Spencer, his color had changed. He was gray like old paper, his left hand clutching his chest, his right hand reaching toward me. I could not reach the phone in time. The doctor called it a massive coronary. Natural causes, nothing anyone could have done. I knew better. Spencer Sterling died of a broken heart, sitting in his favorite leather chair. Betrayed by the son who had been the center of his world, the memory retreated, leaving me back in my silent penthouse. The folder was still open, the photograph still staring up at me. James and Sophie Sterling, Spencer's grandson, Spencer's great-granddaughter, living under a bridge because Gregory had denied them shelter. For 30 years, I had been a ghost in my own life. Running Heavenwood Properties was just something to fill the days after Spencer was gone. I stopped caring about most things, stopped having people over, stopped celebrating holidays. The women on my charity committees called me an ice queen behind my back. I never corrected them, but ice can preserve things. Like rage, like purpose. I closed the folder with a soft thud. The decision felt like waking up from a long sleep. I pressed the intercom button on my desk phone. "Margaret, I need the jet prepared. And call Arthur at the car service. I will need transportation in Cleveland, Ohio." "Yes, Mrs. Sterling. When will you be departing?" I looked at the black folder once more. "Tomorrow morning. And Margaret, pack my suitcase for at least a week. Weather appropriate for Ohio this time of year. Of course, will anyone be accompanying you?" "No," I said. "This is personal." I ended the call and walked to the window. 65 floors below, people moved like insects. They were so small from this height, so easy to forget they had lives as complicated as my own. For decades, I had kept myself above it all, detached, safe. That ended tomorrow. I pressed my palm against the cool glass. I am 78 years old. I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. I have a company that bears my husband's family name. What I do not have is much time left, or anything resembling a family. The man under that bridge did not know I existed. His father had probably told him I was gone, just as he had told me they had moved abroad. Another of Gregory's convenient lies. James did not know about Spencer, about Heavenwood, about his legacy. He did not know that his eyes, if they were anything like the ones in his driver's license photo from the report, were the same deep brown as my husband's. He did not know, but he would. I have not prayed since Spencer's funeral. I have not believed in much of anything. But standing here, looking out at the vastness of the ocean, I found myself hoping that some trace of Spencer lived in that young man, that Gregory's poison had not reached all the way down to the next generation. Tomorrow, I would find out. Tomorrow, I would meet the last of the Sterlings, even if he did not know that was what he was. Sophie smashed her toast with a happy squeal, and James gently wiped her tiny fingers. The love and attention he showed her never wavered. It was a quiet, unwavering devotion that reminded me so much of Spencer James. "May I make an observation?" I asked. "Of course. Heavenwood Properties has 100 agents who can sell a 4-bedroom house. What we don't have are enough people who understand what turns it into a home." I set my coffee cup down. "You had a home ripped away from you. You've fought to make a home for your daughter, under a bridge. You understand this better than any MBA I could hire." His brow furrowed slightly. "What are you suggesting?" "We have an opening for an assistant project manager. Entry level, long hours, not particularly glamorous work." I held his gaze steadily. "This isn't a gift, James. It's an opportunity. You would start at the bottom. No one would know who you are. Your success or failure would be entirely your own." He was quiet for a long moment, absently helping Sophie with her sippy cup. "I don't have any experience in..." "Neither did Spencer when he started building homes for veterans," I said, with a slight smile. "But you have something more valuable, perspective. What would I tell people about how I got the job?" that you applied and interviewed like everyone else, which you will." I paused. "No one at the company knows about our connection. That's your story to tell or keep private, as you choose." He looked out over the gardens, considering. "I don't want special treatment. You won't get any. In fact, you'll probably have to work twice as hard to prove yourself." I stood, gathering my napkin. "Think about it. The position starts next Monday. If you're interested, I'll have HR set up a formal interview tomorrow." I left him there with Sophie, knowing he needed space to decide. By dinner, he had given me his answer. 2 days later, he walked into Heavenwood Properties headquarters for his interview. He was wearing a suit I had never seen before. He must have purchased it himself. It wasn't expensive, but it fit well. He looked like a sterling. James's first year at Heavenwood was a trial by fire. I made sure he received no special attention. Quite the opposite. His direct supervisor, Mark Reynolds, was notoriously demanding. James spent his days buried in zoning regulations, environmental impact reports, and market analyses. On weekends, he worked open houses, setting up signs and brewing coffee for the senior agents. I watched from a distance, never intervening. Each month, I received his performance evaluations along with those of all junior staff. His were consistently excellent, not because he was naturally gifted at real estate, but because he approached each task with the same methodical focus he had once applied to factory work. He was thorough, reliable, and, most importantly, he listened. By his second year, he had moved into a junior sales position. I happened to be at the main office one afternoon when he was working with a young couple teachers with a new baby, looking for their first home. I observed unobtrusively. "How's your morning routine?" James was asking them, ignoring the listing sheets spread across the table. "Who gets up with the baby? How long is your commute to school?" The couple exchanged surprised glances. "Well, Sarah usually gets up first with Emma," the husband said. "I handle the evening shift since Sarah needs to grade papers." James nodded, making notes. "And what's the most important room in your current apartment? Where do you spend most of your time?" "The kitchen table," Sarah answered immediately. "It's where I grade, where we eat, where we play with Emma." "Tell me about your ideal Sunday," James continued. I watched him build a picture of their life, not their wish list. When they mentioned loving to walk, he eliminated neighborhoods without sidewalks. When they talked about Sarah's mother visiting often, he focused on homes with guest rooms. By the end of the session, he had narrowed their options to 3 houses, all under their budget. None with the granite countertops they thought they wanted, but each perfect for their actual lives. 2 weeks later, they closed on a modest 3-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood with excellent schools. Their commission was smaller than if James had pushed them toward a more expensive property. But they sent a holiday card that December with a photo of their family on their new front porch. James pinned it to his cubicle wall. Word spread. More clients requested the young guy who actually listens. His colleagues, initially dismissive of the quiet newcomer, began to take notice. By the 3rd year, James had been promoted to senior project manager, overseeing the development of a new community in Tampa. The Heavenwood Grove project was ambitious. 50 homes designed to attract young families priced out of the luxury market but unwilling to sacrifice quality of life. I attended the planning meetings, watching as James transformed from the hesitant man I had found under that bridge. He commanded respect not through force of personality but through competence and empathy. He insisted on green spaces between houses, sidewalks wide enough for strollers, and a community center. "People aren't just buying houses," he explained to the development team. "They're buying the space between their front door and their neighbors. They're buying the walk to school. They're buying the view from their kitchen window while they wash dishes." His team listened because he had earned their respect. They knew nothing of his connection to me or his past. They only knew him as the project manager whose developments consistently sold out because he built communities people wanted to live in. Sophie was for now a bright, curious child who spent her days at Heavenwood's corporate daycare center. James had moved them into a modest house about 15 minutes from my estate, close enough for regular visits but clearly establishing their independence. I respected his need for separation, for building his own life. Our relationship had settled into a comfortable rhythm of Sunday dinners and occasional weeknight visits. I never spoke of Gregory. James never asked. The annual executive meeting was scheduled for the first Monday in October. The company had grown significantly under my leadership. From Spencer's modest home-building business to one of Florida's premier real estate firms, I had run it alone for 30 years, longer than Spencer and I had run it together. I was tired that the boardroom was packed that morning. Every vice president, division head, and senior manager was in attendance, all expecting the standard annual review. James sat midway down the long table, his portfolio open, pen ready. At 31, he was one of the youngest senior managers in the company's history. But he had earned his seat. The room quieted as I took my place at the head of the table. I remained standing, surveying the faces turned expectantly toward me. These were good people, competent professionals, but only one of them understood what Spencer had built. 30 years ago, I began. My husband, Spencer, stood in this room and told our then small team that Havenwood wasn't in the business of building houses. We were in the business of building futures. I paused, letting the words settle. Spencer didn't believe in just constructing buildings. He believed in building things that last, foundations for families, legacies of integrity. I moved slowly around the table, making eye contact with each person. For 30 years, I have searched for a successor who shares that vision. Not someone who can read a balance sheet, but someone who understands the value of a front door key in a family's hand. A hushed anticipation fell over the room. Several vice presidents straightened in their chairs. My gaze continued its circuit until it reached James. He was watching me carefully, his expression curious but unassuming. I have found that person, I continued. Someone who started at the bottom and proved their worth through integrity and an empathy that cannot be taught. The room followed my gaze to James, whose eyes widened slightly in realization. Effective today, the new CEO of Havenwood Properties is James Sterling. The silence was absolute. James stared at me, shock evident on his face. Then, around the table, expressions shifted from surprise to calculation to acceptance. A few of the vice presidents nodded slowly. They had worked closely with James, seen his results and his leadership style. The appointment was unexpected but not inexplicable. James, I said, gesturing to the head of the table, would you care to say a few words? He stood slowly, collecting himself with a visible effort. As he moved to take my place, he paused beside me. Why? He whispered. Just for me to hear. I met his gaze steadily. Because you are Spencer's legacy. And mine. As James addressed the room, his initial uncertainty giving way to quiet confidence, I took a seat and watched the future of Havenwood take shape. I was in my office at Havenwood Tower reviewing quarterly reports when Margaret buzzed through on the intercom. Mrs. Sterling. There are 2 people in the lobby insisting on seeing Mr. Sterling. They don't have an appointment, but they're quite persistent. Something in her tone caught my attention. Did they give their names? A brief hesitation. A Mr. and Mrs. Gregory Sterling. The name hit me like a physical blow. For a moment, I couldn't breathe properly. Mrs. Sterling? Should I have security escort them out? I gathered myself. No, tell them Mr. Sterling is unavailable. I'll come down. Are you sure that's I'm sure? Margaret, I stood, smoothing my skirt with hands that were suddenly unsteady. 30 years since I'd seen my son. The elevator ride to the lobby was 17 floors of memories. Gregory, as a toddler, running to Spencer with arms outstretched. Gregory at 12, proudly showing his father a model house he'd built. Gregory at 20, his eyes cold as he explained why he deserved early access to his trust fund. I had seen the change in him, the growing sense of entitlement, but Spencer had been blind to it. He had loved, without reservation. The doors opened onto the gleaming marble lobby, and there they were. I recognized Gregory immediately, despite the years. Thinner, gray at the temples, lines etched deeply around his mouth, but unmistakably my son. The woman beside him was Brenda. Both were dressed in clothes that had once been expensive but now showed signs of wear. Gregory was gesturing emphatically to the security guard. You don't understand who I am. I'm his father. I demand to see him immediately. As I explained, Sir, Mr. Sterling isn't available without an appointment, the guard replied calmly. Then make an appointment. Tell him his parents are here. I crossed the lobby, my heels clicking against the marble. The sound caught their attention. Gregory turned, irritation clear on his face, until he saw me. His expression froze. Hello, Gregory, I said, my voice remarkably steady. He paled. Mother. Brenda's eyes widened. Alice, she said, her voice tense. It's been a long time. We've been trying to reach James. I know why you're here, I interrupted. looking directly at Gregory. The news about James's appointment had made the business section. You think there's an opportunity here? That's not fair, Gregory protested weakly. We're his parents. We have a right. A right. I repeated the word as if it were foreign. Let's discuss rights. Not here. I turned to the security guard. Please escort these visitors to conference room B and notify Mr. Sterling's assistant that he is not to be disturbed for any reason. Yes, Mrs. Sterling. Gregory and Brenda exchanged glances but followed the guard to the elevators. I took a separate one, needing a moment to compose myself. The conference room was small, with a glass table. They had seated themselves on one side. I remained standing. You look well, Mother, Gregory began, his voice taking on a smooth quality I remembered too well. It's been too long, 30 years, for months, and 16 days, I replied, since the day you emptied our accounts and disappeared. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. I know you must be upset. I cut him off. That is too small a word for what I felt. We weren't just upset, Gregory. We made mistakes, Brenda interjected. We were young, but we're James's parents. We want to rebuild a relationship. I turned my gaze to her. A relationship? Tell me about this relationship. Was it the one where you refused to let your son and granddaughter stay with you when they had nowhere else to go? Or, perhaps, the one where you told James I was gone? Gregory shifted in his seat. We had our reasons. Do you know where I found your son? I asked, leaning forward with both hands on the table. Under a highway bridge, in the rain, his child sick with fever. That's where your relationship left him. Brenda's face flushed. We were having financial difficulties ourselves. You were having difficulties, I repeated, each word precise and sharp. And your solution was to let your son and his baby live under a bridge. I straightened, looking directly at Gregory. Your father passed away because of what happened. The doctor called it a serious heart condition, but it was a broken heart. Spencer passed away sitting in his study, staring at the empty safe where our life savings had been. Gregory paled further. I never meant, ... You didn't mean for him to pass away. Perhaps not. But you meant to take from us. You meant to lie. You meant to use his name in Seattle. I paused. Just as you mean to use James now. That's not fair. Brenda protested. We've had hardships. We're just trying to reconnect with our son, with our family. Family? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. You speak of family. Family doesn't abandon a child. Family doesn't build a life on lies that hurt their own father. I reached into my pocket and withdrew a folded document, placing it on the table. This is a legal order. It prohibits both of you from contacting James or Sophie. It also bars you from entering any Havenwood property. I slid another document forward. This is a record of what was taken from our accounts. While the legal time limit has passed, should you contest the first order, I will ensure this becomes very public. Gregory stared at the papers, then at me. You can't do this. He's our son. No, I said simply. He was your son. You gave up that right when you left him under that bridge. I moved to the door and opened it. 2 security guards waited outside. These gentlemen will escort you out. If you return, you will be arrested. Brenda stood abruptly. You think you can just influence our son by his loyalty? I regarded her calmly. I didn't need to buy anything, Brenda. I simply offered him what you never did, the truth and a choice. Gregory remained seated, looking suddenly old and defeated. Does he know about what I did to you and Dad? Yes, I answered. I told him everything, and he made his peace with it, and he still took the CEO position, knowing it was my father's company. He took it because it was his grandfather's company. I corrected. Spencer would have been proud of him. Gregory finally stood. And you, Mother, are you proud of what you've done? I am proud, I said, holding the door open wider, that I protected my family. Goodbye. They walked out. Brenda with her head high in defiance, Gregory with his shoulders slumped. I watched until the elevator doors closed and they were gone. Only then did I allow myself to sink into a chair. I don't know how long I sat there before a soft knock came at the door. Alice. James stood in the doorway, concern on his face. Margaret told me what happened. I straightened, trying to compose myself. I'm sorry. I should have let you handle it. It wasn't my place. He crossed the room and, to my surprise, took my hand. It was exactly your place, he said quietly. You've been protecting this family since the day you found us. I looked up at him. They'll try again. People like that always do, he said, and we'll handle it together. He smiled slightly. Sophie's downstairs. She made something for you in art class. Do you want to see it? I nodded, suddenly unable to speak. The view from the CEO's office was spectacular. The three of us stood on the private balcony, Sophie between us, holding our hands. Higher, she demanded. On the count of 3, James and I lifted her up. Her laughter carried on the sea breeze. At 5, Sophie was all curiosity and energy. James watched her with a smile before turning to me. The board approved the new community housing project this morning. Construction starts next month. I nodded, pride warming my chest. Spencer would have loved that. I wish I could have known him, James said quietly. You do know him, I replied. Every time you put a family in a home they can afford, every time you choose integrity, he lives in you, James, and in her. We both looked at Sophie, who was carefully rearranging tiny trees around a model building. She had his eyes, his gentle determination. I've been thinking, James said after a moment. The penthouse is too big for just me and Sophie, and that estate of yours has a lot of empty rooms. I glanced at him, surprised. Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? He shrugged, a hint of a smile on his lips. Sophie misses having breakfast with you, and the commute is brutal. Heavenwood was built for a family. It's been waiting a long time to be one again. Sophie bounded back to us. Grandma Alice, did you know there are fish in the fountain downstairs? Can we get fish for our pond? Our pond? I caught James's eye over her head, seeing my own emotion reflected there. I think that can be arranged, I told her, smoothing her wild curls. In fact, I think your grandfather would insist on it. The sun was setting, casting a golden light across the city. For 30 years, I had been preserving the past. Now, with Sophie's hand in mine and James beside me, I was finally stepping into the future. The difficult cycle was over. The legacy was secure. And I, Alice Sterling, was no longer a caretaker of empty rooms. I was home,